Hey, quantitative literacy students out there. I want to go over an example of using a spreadsheet and playing with an interesting problem. So I'm going to share a couple of things with you here. Playing around with an idea, 18 trillion and counting. The lesson for this week has us playing around with stacks of money. And so we're going to do a little fiddling. So we're talking about the national deficit and the national debt. We got some big numbers. So for example, right here, 2,000 billion. What does that look like? Over here, we have 20,000 billion. How much is that? So we're going to build a spreadsheet that's going to help us look at dollar amounts. We're going to convert those dollar amounts to heights. So if we took a bunch of $1 bills and stacked them up, how big would the stacks be? So we're given some information to start this off in our worksheet that, let's scroll this a little, 1,000 $1 bills is about 4.3 inches tall. And so let's take that into a new spreadsheet. So I'm going to use Google Sheets. So I'm in a good place to store this file, my quantitative literacy fall 2011. So I hope you have a good place to store files. We are going to create a new spreadsheet. It's a good idea to name it, otherwise you'll have a whole bunch of untitled spreadsheets, which isn't good. There we go. Let's say lesson 1.2, stacks of money. And you don't have to give it a super short name or a super long name, just something that you'll look back at later and remember what's going on there. I'll blow my screen up so you can see a little bit better. All right, so I need to keep track of money, and actually let's call it dollars. And I also need to keep track of heights. So whenever you're in a spreadsheet, don't just go in there and type a number without saying what it is. Always go and say what it is. So we're given the information that $1,000 is 4.3 inches. Now, it says above that this is dollars, but it doesn't say what the height is here. So I probably should adjust this column to say height. And so then what we want to do is we want to say, well, let's get a bigger stack, because 1,000 isn't all that much. So then I want to take the number above and multiply by 1,000. Now I could do that in my head. I could whip out a calculator, but remember, a spreadsheet is a calculator. To make a spreadsheet into a calculator, you type equals and then do your math. I want to take 1,000 times this dollar amount above. And so I just click on it. And it's saying, give me a preview answer here. One problem with this preview answer is I got to kind of point and count the zeros. So I'm going to reformat all the things in this column. To highlight the whole column, I click on the column heading A, and I want to format the number as a number, and it shows me an example of what it's going to look like. Now, I really don't need the decimals. I guess I could try rounded currency. Let's give that one a try. Yeah, I think that'll be okay. So now that the comma's in there, I can see, oh, 1,000 thousands is a million. Good to know. Since I wrote a formula that multiplies the number above by 1,000, instead of retyping a new formula here equals 1,000 times the number above, that gives me, I started with 4, I now have about 4,000. That looks reasonable, and I delete it. I could just copy this formula over here. There's two ways to do that. One, click on the formula, then point to the bottom right corner, click and drag one cell to the right, and that'll recopy that. Now, it not only copied the formula, it copied the dollars. So that's a problem. I got to get rid of the dollars there. So there's different ways to do things. Sometimes one way is better than another. Let's just call it a number and get rid of the decimal places for now. All right, so we now know that $1 million is 4,000 inches. Can you name something that's 4,000 inches? I cannot. So I think that might be better in feet. I need a new column, height in feet. How many feet are in an inch? A good day, there's 12. So I'm going to whip out my worksheet here, and I'm going to do a little calculation. I'm starting off with 4,300 inches. And I need to convert that to feet. The common way I like to do this is by multiplying by a conversion fraction. So first thing I do is I make this a fraction by putting it over 1 times a new fraction. Since inches is here in the top, I need to put it here in the bottom, and then whatever I'm converting to, in this case feet, goes in the top. And I happen to know that in 1 foot there are 12 inches. So this tells me a couple of things. Since the number is in the bottom, it's being divided. So on my calculator, I just got to take my given number and divide by 12. If the converting number was in the top, then I would be multiplying. But in this case, I'm dividing. So what this tells me is to get rid of inches, they cancel if they're in opposite position. I can change to feet by dividing by 12. So back to my spreadsheet. And anytime I'm doing a problem like this, I'm going back and forth between my calculator and a piece of paper. So for every one of these problems, I expect you to be scribbling this stuff down and whipping out a calculator. I highly recommend a spreadsheet calculator. All right, so let's see. I need to do a calculation in a spreadsheet, so I type equals. I need to take this number and divide by 12, and that gives me feet. Now, 0.33333 feet is kind of useless out there, so I'm just going to use the reduce the decimals, decrease the decimals. Let's knock it down to maybe 1 decimal place. So it's about 358 feet. Okay, let's see, like a football field, soccer field length. I can picture that. So visually, what do I have here? The original stack of 1,000 bills was about 4.3 inches. 1,000 of these stacks would be 360 feet tall, roughly. So if we laid that stack down sideways, it would spread out across a whole football field or soccer field and a little farther. Good to know. So that's 1,000,000 bills. We're asked to take it farther. We want to get 1,000 millions. So since I have a formula above that multiplies stuff by 1,000, I can just fill it down. So 1,000 million is what? Here we have our hundreds, thousands, millions. It's a billion. So I have $1 billion here. Here I have a formula that multiplies by 1,000, so I can fill it down again. That gives me 4 million inches. I have no idea what 4 million inches is. So I go over to the feet column, fill that number down. That gives me, what is that, like 360,000. Let's give that number some commas. Let's see, format, number. There's some commas. And I don't think we need 2 decimals. Let's take it down to 1. So it's like 400,000 feet. Can you think of something that's 300,000 feet long? I can't. Maybe we should change to miles. Let's give it a try. Height in miles. All right, I got to go to my scratch paper. So let's see. Over here, I have roughly 360,000 feet. And I need to convert that to miles. So let's see, I put that over 1. I multiply by a fraction. Feet needs to go, so it goes on the bottom. That means miles has to go on the top, and I need to know how many feet are in a mile. Some days I remember, some days I don't. I can just Google it. And if I do, Google will tell me there are 5,280 feet in 1 mile. Since the number's in the bottom, I have to divide by it. So now I go to my spreadsheet to tell it how to do this, because it is my calculator. So over here, I think I'll start down on this cell, equals to start the calculation. I need this number divided by 5,280. And if a number is already on the screen, we don't retype it. We just click on it. Okay, super important. So the 300,000 is already on the screen, so I clicked on it. That's C4. 5,280 wasn't anywhere in my sheet, so I had to type it in the formula. 67 miles. That's a lot of miles. I live in Pendleton, Tri-Cities, Washington's about that far away. So if I laid down a stack of $1 billion bills, it would stretch all the way to Tri-Cities. That's a lot of money. Let's reformat that sucker as a number and drop a decimal place. So again, to fix that, I went to format, number, to get the commas in there. But I didn't want 2 decimal places. So when I point to this, it tells me it will decrease the decimals. So usually if you point and wait, it'll tell you what it does. My screen might look a little different than yours if you're using Google Sheets, because I've blown up my screen. Your screen might look more like that. But it's better on YouTube. All right, so I'm going to do it again. So that's miles. So I'm going to take 1,000 of these. What are these? That's a million, billion, 1,000 billions. So I just fill this line down. And then that's too narrow to see it. So if I double click the boundary, or I can click and drag to resize. Let's see, what do we got? We have our ones, our thousands, our millions, our billions, a trillion. 1,000 billion is a trillion. Let's fill these guys. Now, it turns out you can fill multiple formulas at one time. Highlight all of them, and then point to the bottom corner. It's a two-step process, and then click and drag. All right. That's more inches than I can comprehend, more feet than I can comprehend. A $1 trillion bill stacked would be 67,000 miles. Holy crap, remember, that is miles. A lot of miles. What is that like? What do planes fly at? Let's see. Let's see, flight altitude, is that what they call it? Flight altitude. Google says 39,000 feet is what aircraft typically flies at. 39,000 feet. Are we above that? Yeah, we're twice as high as a typical flight is off the ground, right? So if we had this stack up, an airplane could fly through the middle of it. Man, that's a lot. How far is the moon? Let's see, distance to moon. The moon is 200,000 miles. Let's see, 67,000 is close to 70,000. 23,000 is close to 21,000. So that would be like what, three of these stacks would make it almost to the moon. 4 of them would go past the moon. Let's double check that. What if I take the stack above and multiply by 4? Oops, wrong spot. Over here equals this sucker times 4. And then show me some commas there. Let's see. Format, number, commas. 271,000 miles. The moon is 238. Yeah, 4 stacks is farther than the moon is away. That's $4 trillion. What are our debts like? Back up here. Our yearly debt. Let's see, move you out of my way. Our yearly debt, let's see, 2017, 15 is probably right here. And let's see which is which. The deficit is this one. So our yearly debt lately, how much we're over each year, so like that's your credit card debt at the end of the year, 1,000 billion. So we're $1 trillion in debt each year. Okay, that is twice as high in dollar bills as an airplane flies, and it's 1/3 of the way to the moon. Nuts. Those are big numbers. Look at the numbers on the other side. On the other side, 2015 is the black line, about the same level. 12,000 billion would be 12 trillion. That would be 3 times the distance from the Earth to the moon in dollar bills stacked up. Big, big numbers. Man, that was fun. All right, so if you haven't already did it, you're going to build this spreadsheet. I just built it here, so hopefully this video will help you out in doing so. Google is kind of cool. It saves stuff as I go. So this right here was, let's see, let's fill that over. That was $4 billion. Big numbers. So about distance to the moon. Whenever you put a number in your spreadsheet, label it, because otherwise you look at it tomorrow and you're like, what the heck was that number for? So good spreadsheet practices. If you're going to do a calculation, you got to start with equals. If a number is already on the screen, point and click. Sometimes the numbers are hard to read. We can format them, format them in a lot of different ways. And there's more down below here. If I'd zoom out, you'd see it. Okay, so those are some cool spreadsheet tips. Have fun doing this. This is some cool stuff. Get in touch with me if you need help with anything. Take care. Do good math.